समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
On the sidelines of the otherwise contentious Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO summit, which was recently held in Qingdao in China, a significant development had unfolded. India was once again assured by Russia of the timely delivery of the remaining two S-400 Triumph air defense systems. The assurance came directly from Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov to his Indian counterpart, Rajnath Singh, offering a measure of comfort to New Delhi's strategic planners and prompting Indian media outlets to cover the commitment with a sense of, I would say, cautious relief. Now, these S-400 systems, which form the outermost layer of India's integrated air defense shield, have proven to be rather effective. And here, I mean during Operation Sindoor, where they were successfully integrated with domestically developed platforms like the Akash surface-to-air missiles or the L-70 anti-aircraft guns and indigenous drones, etc. Now, unsurprisingly, within India's strategic community, there is a growing consensus that New Delhi must not only complete the current S-400 procurement, but also explore future acquisitions, possibly including the more advanced S-500 systems. However, this optimism belies the long and complicated journey of the S-400 deal. Signed in 2018 at a value of about $5.43 billion, the agreement was initially hailed as a bold assertion of India's strategic autonomy, especially during the Trump administration, a time when NATO ally Turkey faced sanctions under CAATSA for pursuing the same system. Now, India, by contrast, escaped US sanctions, a testament to its rising importance in the evolving Indo-Pacific calculus. Yet, what was once a symbol of defiance and diplomatic balance has now become a victim of President Putin's protracted war in Ukraine. Originally scheduled for delivery between 2021 and 2023, the first three S-400 systems did arrive by late 21. The remaining two, however, have remained undelivered as Russia's war in Ukraine enters its fourth year with no clear end in sight. Now, the problem is that the timeline of the delivery has repeatedly slipped. It is now scheduled for late 2026 and 2027. In my opinion, there are at least four critical factors behind these delays, each highlighting the vulnerabilities and priorities of the Russian defense sector and the geopolitical complexities surrounding Moscow's partnerships. So let me tell you all four one by one. The first is Russia's battlefield losses and domestic priorities. Russia has suffered significant material losses in Ukraine, while propaganda from both sides makes it rather difficult to verify. But independent monitoring groups like Oryx have documented that at least 12 S-400 systems have been partially or completely destroyed. Now, this is significant given the S-400's role as the backbone of Russia's long-range air defense, with more than 30 regiments reportedly in service. Now, compounding this, the S-400 is vital for safeguarding Russia's expansive territory, particularly as its military posture faces new threats from NATO's rejuvenated eastern flank. Remember that Sweden and Finland have recently joined NATO. Now, if Russia is short on operational systems, it is far more likely to divert new production towards replenishing its own arsenals than fulfilling export obligations. Let's dive further into this. To understand how vital the S-400 program is for Russia, we must take a look back to its roots. Revitalized around the year 2000 under President Putin, the S-400 system was part of a broader effort to restore Russia's defense industrial base and rejuvenate its economy. A state-backed investment drive led to the expansion of three major production hubs: Obukhov plant in St. Petersburg, Avitek plant in Kirov, and the NMP plant in Nizhny Novgorod. These efforts bore fruit by 2016, enabling large-scale production of the S-400 as well as newer systems like the S-300 V4 and the S-500. In January 2023, while the Ukraine war was very much on, Putin even visited the Obukhovsky plant, publicly claiming that Russia's surface-to-air missile production, the SAM production, exceeded the combined output of the rest of the world. And yet, none of this has translated into India receiving its remaining systems over the last 2 years, a telling contradiction. Now, the second factor. In my opinion, the second factor is the collapse of Russian arms export capacity, which needs to be studied better. Data on this broader trend is quite worrying. According to SIPRI, Russian arms exports declined by a 64% between 2020 and 2024 compared to the previous 5-year period. So it's giving a 5-year outlook. But these figures look gloomier when just the war years are studied. Now, for instance, reports from Kazakhstan tell us that Russian arms exports shrank by a 92% between 2021 and the end of 2024, falling to below $1 billion annually, a staggering 14-fold drop. So the difference is that while SIPRI's figures span a longer horizon, which is like 5 years, Arbad's data, which is a Kazakh outlet, focuses specifically on the war years, offering a more immediate sense of Russia's military export collapse. Therefore, the correlation is not ill-founded, and it can be extrapolated from other geopolitical developments as well. Let me give you a few examples. Russia's declining military export prowess is evident when viewed through its inability to protect key allies. Despite Syria being central to Russia's Middle East strategy, Moscow failed to defend Bashar al-Assad's regime or secure its own military bases, even though supply lines like the Syrian Express link Tartus to its Black Sea war efforts against Ukraine. Similarly, during the recent 12-day war between Israel and Iran, Russia offered Iran only verbal support, despite Tehran's vital role in Ukraine through Shahid drones. Iran's request for air defense systems like the S-300 and S-400 were ignored, prompting a rare public criticism from Iranian officials. This situation also mirrors Russia's retreat in the Caucasus and inability to assert any real military posture anymore. So, the loss of access to Western markets, materials, and customers, combined with battlefield attrition, all of this has dramatically curtailed Moscow's ability to act as a reliable defense supplier. And, of course, this is not good news for us. Now, what about the third factor? The third factor is sanctions and supply chains. Due to prolonged Western sanctions, Russia has become increasingly reliant on China for microchips and other sensitive technological components. One of my consistent arguments for a long time now has been that regardless of the outcome of the Ukraine war per se, and whether Russia wins or loses the 20% of Ukrainian territory it is fighting for, in the process, it is getting pushed with China in a rather irreversible manner. While the Indian Ministry of Defense has periodically issued advisories urging our armed forces to remove Chinese origin technology from military hardware, particularly in imported systems, the matter has assumed greater urgency following the developments during Operation Sindoor for reasons that are widely understood. Now, against this backdrop, it becomes pertinent to consider what this means for the production and delivery of new S-400 systems. One likely inference from the ongoing delays is that Russia may be supplying India with newly manufactured units rather than from existing stock, many of which are reportedly destroyed. So, to navigate Western sanctions, primarily imposed by the US and the European Union, Russia has been sourcing microelectronic components via regional partners such as Kazakhstan, China, and Belarus, albeit at a much higher cost and under increasing diplomatic scrutiny. So while this workaround has helped keep some production lines active, in fact, many production lines active, it has significantly inflated the cost of crucial parts and further deepened Russia's dependency on China for sustaining its defense manufacturing capabilities. Now, indeed, weapons analysts examining destroyed Russian equipment in Ukraine have repeatedly found Western-made components, often from the US, from Japan, from Europe, and all of this is happening despite the sanctions. Now, the question here to ask is whether these parts were smuggled post-2022, which means after the war began, or are leftover stockpiles. Now, the answer to this remains unclear. However, what is evident is that Russia's production chain is neither sorted nor independent. And when faced with scarcity, Russia is always going to prioritize, like any other country, its domestic requirements over foreign contracts, even long-standing ones like India's. Reports also suggest that Almaz Anti, the Russian conglomerate that makes the S-400, has recently set up a drone manufacturing facility in China, likely using this as a channel to access chips and other sensitive technologies. Now, while this allows Russia to keep its production lines running, it further entrenches its reliance on Chinese goodwill, a development that is uncomfortable for India. And that brings me to the fourth and the last factor, which is how do we assess China's strategic pressure on Russia? A more troubling possibility is that China may be pressuring Russia, either directly or indirectly, not to prioritize India's defense deliveries. Now, this wouldn't be unprecedented. After the Galwan clash in 2020, Chinese officials made their displeasure with Russia's defense cooperation with India rather explicit. Since then, Beijing's growing technical and strategic support to Pakistan, especially during events like Pakistan's Operation Swift Retort, has made the regional dynamics clearer to the Indian observer. Our armed forces officials have acknowledged that China provided real-time intelligence to Pakistan during that episode, confirming that Pakistan was merely the front while China orchestrated key moves from behind. In this broader context, China may actually have few more incentives to keep Russian weapon exports subdued. With Russia increasingly bogged down in Ukraine and facing sanctions, China has quietly filled the void in regions traditionally influenced by Moscow. In the Caucasus, for example, Azerbaijan has begun purchasing China-Pakistan co-produced fighter jets, the J-17s. Meanwhile, in Iran, during the recent 12-day war, Russia was unable to offer any military aid, leaving space for China to expand its influence. And Beijing has reportedly sold weapons to Iran and will continue doing so. Although no official foreign policy statement would admit such motives, these strategic shifts suggest a calculated Chinese effort to limit Russia's defense outreach, especially towards India, while positioning itself as the emerging arms supplier in contested theaters, and especially contested theaters for us. These currents are best read between the lines and through outcomes, not by statements. Therefore, for India, the long arc of its acquisition of the Russian-made S-400 Triumf air defense system now embodies a kind of a paradox. An extraordinary asset, delayed at a time when the country's outer defensive architecture demands urgent consolidation. Although definitive explanations for the four factors I outlined today remain elusive, it is strategically prudent for India to invest in building its own air defense capabilities, such as through initiatives like Project Kusha, even if the development timelines appear extended. I'll be back to discuss this and more. Stay tuned.